This next storm system is about to make a complete transformation. Let's dive into the details and show you what we're talking about. Here's the overall setup. We had a little clipper system that's finally moving out into the northeast. Back behind it, there is the jet stream. That's your 540 line, folks, lifting all the way to Canada. We got southwest winds lifting those warmer temperatures. In fact, record high temperatures could be as far north as the Canadian border today. And back behind it, we are looking at our next storm system that will be entering the west coast today. So here's the setup going forward. We've got the system. This is your wet season up there in the Pacific Northwest. You've been inundated lately with very heavy rainfall, and yet we're going to have another system that's going to be trailing behind this one during your weekend. So expect more heavy rain, but this one's actually going to be bringing more snow to the higher elevations and more snow across the Intermountain West and diving down towards the Rockies. Out ahead of this system, we are expecting very heavy winds. We've got numerous high wind watches, wind advisories. I expect this to really start to fill in over the coming days and expect really windy conditions across the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. But there are your record temperatures today, folks. In fact, we could have 22 across the lower 48 that could potentially be record highs. Look at the warm surge with the jet stream all the way to Canada. That allows those temperatures to lift all the way into the 50s in Wisconsin, folks. That is plenty warm for this time of year. Widespread 60s and yes, widespread 70s further south, but you can see the sharp gradient. That's the cold front that we're waiting for our next storm system that will be approaching the Rockies. And as it does, leaving behind, it's going to lay down a pretty good snowpack in its wake. Pretty heavy snows across this region that will dive through the Intermountain West, head towards the Rockies, and yes, even places like Denver could pick up another inch or two from this system. But there's the cold front as we get into Friday morning, and then out ahead of it, you still have the warmer air. There is the dry line down there in Texas. You've got the downsloping wind. That's a west wind. That's the warmest wind for those folks down there. So some areas could be approaching 80 degrees on Friday, but out ahead of it, there's the warm sector, and we're going to leave behind a lot of heavy winds in its wake. So there are some wind gusts over the next 2 days as this system approaches. And yes, look at the graph on the right hand corner of the screen there. All those areas in red, that is 50 upwards to over 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts. But even down here into Kansas and Missouri, down in Oklahoma, and even a good part of Texas is still going to be seeing 35, 40, some 45 mile-per-hour wind gusts. And that could last actually for several days as this system will be moving across into the southeast and eventually head towards the east. And as it does, there's the precipitation for the next 2 days. So we've got this storm system coming in from the Pacific Northwest. This is going to be diving southeast. Most of this is going to be in the form of snow. And then out ahead of it, this is going to be rain out ahead of this cold front. And as we shift further south, we've got a little bit more instability across southeastern Oklahoma. Those storms could likely turn severe during the day on Friday. And then heading into Saturday, further south, we have even warmer conditions. So let's take a look at the temperatures for Saturday morning. You can see where the cold front is, right? It's draped right across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, back into southeastern portions of Oklahoma, swinging all the way into Illinois. Look at the temperatures, folks. Those are lows in Illinois. We're talking mid-50s. That's crazy, insane stuff. That is your warm sector. Low 60s, even 70 degrees down there in southeast Texas, down into Louisiana. That's where we're going to have the instability that could spark some severe storms. But now let's take a look at the upper level winds, because this is a pretty significant difference in what we were looking at just 3 days ago. Notice the trough ejection. It's not nearly as deep, and it's more elongated now. It doesn't dip much. It doesn't dip as far as south as it was showing 3 days ago. So it's going to take on a completely different setup. Here was the setup 3 days ago. We had a much more significant dip. It took more of a negatively tilted trough. It's the same time frame for late Saturday. That scenario would have left some good snows across Arkansas, Missouri, into Iowa, into Illinois at the time, because you had the cold front would have been taking a more of a negatively tilted trough type turn, allowed the cold front to come in on the backside, but instead it's more elongated. And as it does, the warmer air is outrunning the colder air, essentially. And so you leave behind the dry slot. And this area is more or less dry slotted, so it doesn't get fed the moisture feed, as this would more taking more of a more of a elongated turn. So what the end result is essentially is the warmer air keeps outrunning the colder air and leaving behind a much more elongated trough, not nearly the deep enough trough ejection. So you just don't get no snow across these regions, into Arkansas, into Missouri, into Iowa, into Illinois, hardly anything in Wisconsin. I think you still have the severe storms further south, but even those I don't think are nearly as intense what they could have been with this negatively tilted trough. Honestly, I was expecting more of a moderate type risk day, pretty definitely intense day down there into the southeast. We still get severe storms, which is they're just less. There's going to be less severe essentially. So we still have that slight risk. We still got to be concerned about some damaging winds, some larger hail associated with it, an isolated tornado, but I think this is more or less transferring into a wind maker across this region, southeast Texas, into Shreveport, into Little Rock region, back into the Memphis area, into Jackson. This will eventually swing over into Birmingham as this system will become deeper. So as it does, we still got some colder air in the backside. In fact, with the winds still elevated even by Sunday morning, these are your wind chills. So you're going to feel it. It's going to feel a lot colder to the body than what it looks like on the thermometer out there, because yeah, those winds are still going to be cranking across these regions 20, 30 miles an hour at times. Yeah, we instead of the 50s for lows, we're going to be feeling more like in the teens up there in Illinois, as the colder air will continue to plunge and move from west to east. But there's your warm sector, right? There's your what it feels like up there into the southeast. You're still going to have likely some severe storms, as this storm system will be more or less transforming into a big time wind maker. So I expect a lot of heavy winds out ahead of this system through the southeast, through the Carolinas, and up the east coast. But notice it's all rain, folks, because still, even by Sunday afternoon, this warmer air is still outrunning the colder air. But by the time we get to Sunday night heading into Monday, finally these two systems kind of phase together, what they talk about like kind of merge together. And as they do, that will tend to slow down the system somewhat and allow at least a pocket of colder air to come in on the backside by the time we head into that Sunday night overnight. Now, of course, time of day has a lot to do with this as well. This is about midnight, but we're going to be seeing a changeover to kind of a heavy, wet, sloppy snow up here. So you got all rain out ahead of it. And this is actually fairly significant for Vermont and New Hampshire into Maine, where you just picked up all the heavier snows. And then you've got the rain coming in now. So that's going to melt all the snow on top of the 1 to 2 inches of rain you're going to get. So I'm expecting huge flooding concerns up there. And as the winds start to elevate, notice the low pressures now, right? These are the phasing together of those low pressures as it comes across into the east coast. And as it does, these winds are going to be start to picking up, as well as we'll have a heavier kind of wet snow on the backside. So by the time you wake up on Monday and start heading to work up there into the Northeast, yeah, you're going to be dealing with very high winds, very heavy rain, and then the snow will be transferring on the backside as this system will be moving across, but it's just a fast moving system, folks. This thing is screaming across. Remember, it hits the West Coast today. This is Monday morning. It's basically off the East Coast. This thing flies, right? It doesn't even have time to pick up much snow or have that colder air to come in on the backside because it just flies across the country so fast, but it still has wind gusts pretty significant. So I'm still thinking we could have some power outages up here for Monday morning. So look at some of these wind gusts as you try to head to work at 7 a.m. on Monday. Yeah, we could be looking at wind gusts in the 30s up there in Philly, back into 47 across New York City, even 56 to 63 miles an hour in Providence. Even further north into Boston, could be looking at some 56-mile-per-hour wind gust. And then you start swinging up into Maine, we've got almost the entire state going to be looking at 50-plus mile-per-hour wind gusts. So this could be significant. I'm definitely concerned about power outages as you head Sunday night into Monday morning. But as fast as that moves, remember I showed you how fast it is? Wow, look what happens. I mean, that quickly races off the East Coast. Look what happens on the backside. Same scenario, folks, that we're left with on Thursday. Look at the 540 line all the way up into Canada. That's the warm surge, right? You still got warmer air to contend with. The only coolness is you got this cooler pocket trying to form off the southwest coast there. These are some cooler air aloft and might try to enhance the instability, overturn the atmosphere, start maybe spreading some rain showers. But it's plenty warm air heading into the next week with the jet stream just so far up into Canada. It allows that zonal flow. Zonal flow is a dry flow. Then you got southwest winds, so that's definitely a warm wind. So you're looking at well above average temperatures in Canada, across our northern regions. But even further, pretty much the entire U.S. is still going to be looking at some milder conditions going into next week. I mean, and by Thursday, look at the 14th, folks. I mean, that's your jet stream. It's incredible how far north it is for December. Underneath that, you've got dominating ridges, high pressure. It's almost like it's summer or something. Underneath that, ton of sinking air. This is a lot of sinking air. You can't get precipitation in this type of atmosphere by the time we head into the middle of next week because the jet stream is just so far north. You've got the zonal flow coming in. You got the southwest winds. The only squeeze out precipitation you can find is that little cooler pocket aloft down there in the southwest. And that may maybe overturn the atmosphere, maybe in the higher elevation, squeeze out some snow showers. And it could be some beneficial rains across the panhandle of Texas into West Texas, back into New Mexico. This area has actually been bone dry for several weeks, if not a lot longer than that. So that would be a welcome sight. But nonetheless, I think as we head into the next week, for a good part of the country, for that zonal flow, yeah, that's a lot of dry air. A lot of sinking air. You don't have that upward rising motion air, right? As the air tries to rise, you've got high pressure up aloft and it just squeezes and sinks and presses the atmosphere down. It just shuts it off, right? So the only weakness you have is down there in Texas and down there towards the south where you've got a little bit moisture to work with because you got the Gulf and you got the Atlantic. But other than that, for a good part of the country, it's actually fairly dry and fairly more, mild as we head into next week. So that's the warm wind coming off the Pacific. Those are well above average temperatures, folks. You got the weakness underneath. Further south, yes, you could have normal, just near normal conditions, what it might typically feel like for the month of December down there. A lot of the reason because you could have the extra clouds from the little disturbance in the upper levels. But for the most part, for much of the country, it is going to be mild as we head into next week. So guys, I appreciate you guys following. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update. Wire protect you before and after the storm.